Awesome. So, hi, Andrew, and thanks again for joining this call slash interview slash virtual side chat. Again, I love this picture. You seem to be, this is the Andrew I know, the happy guy who's like on top of the world all the time.
Thanks. No, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So, yeah, can you just give a quick self-introduction of yourself? Because I know you. And apparently we work together in two companies. I didn't know you were at Autodesk. We must have like just like missed each other because I was in Japan, obviously, but I joined in the summer of August 2015. But yeah, for the listeners and viewers, yeah, it'd be great if you can just give a quick self-introduction.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Andrew Levy. I work in talent attraction. I'm a consultant. I've been in the space for, oh God, I don't even know how many years at this point. Long before it was even a term that people talked about. Talent
right? Because
attraction.
it's still relatively new, right?
It is. Yeah. I mean, I would give it maybe it's 15 years old. As something that companies focus on. But I would say probably only within the last 5 years as it actually started to become a real thing. Yeah, I've worked at Autodesk, Uber, WeWork as sort of the founding members of the talent attraction team and built out the function. And right now I'm actually an independent consultant. I have a consulting firm called Dean and Bug Consulting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this your own firm you founded, or?
It is, yeah. Right now it's just me. But yeah, it's my own firm, and I've picked up a couple big name clients actually. So
Yeah, I
since
saw that
opening.
you're doing well. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. No marketing either. They're all just coming to me, which is great.
That's the best way to do it, man. That's the best. Well, you have the industry, and as you said, you've been doing it longer than the term has really been around. So it's great, man. Awesome. So I'm curious, because I actually get questioned. Well, I get asked sometimes, like from my clients, and they will ask, like, what exactly is talent attraction or talent branding? So you being the expert, how would you describe it?
Yeah, for sure. So I sometimes describe it as most of the activities a company does before someone clicks the apply button or before someone signs the offer letter. So that can be everything from marketing and advertising, events and experiences, all the way to like the technology that you put in place to get people interested and ultimately, into your funnel to become an employee.
Right. So it's basically like any business, and then it has the marketing and then the sales, the closing, and this is like the marketing aspect, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No. Okay, cool. So I'm curious though, because again, you've been in this field, I guess, or this sector, whatever you call it, for a while, this profession, before, as you mentioned, the term really started to get popular. So how did you actually like get into it in the first place? Like what made you want to grow in this again relatively new area, especially 10 years ago? It really didn't exist as much as it does today.
Yeah, so I kind of fell into the space much like a lot of people fall into recruiting. So I was actually getting a PhD in philosophy of science.
Okay.
Which I learned pretty quickly was probably a dead end career move. Very few professorships out there in that field. So I dropped out of my PhD and was like, what the hell am I gonna do? And I since I was working in like the science field, I pivoted and thought, okay, I can do PR, I can write for science companies. So I joined a PR firm down in San Diego, and that focuses on life sciences. Okay. And I had a bunch of clients, and it was actually one of my clients that I noticed some pretty negative activity on this new platform of the day called Twitter. So this is how long ago it was. Brand new thing. So I'm seeing all these tweets about the horrible hiring process and this asshole hiring manager and terrible experiences with this company. And down in San Diego, much like San Francisco where I live, it's a very small market in terms of like the types of jobs. There's lots of biotech, lots of science, everybody knows each other.
Mm.
So I was like, this is a big problem for these guys.
Mm.
So I pitched myself in essentially to the company saying, hey, you need to have a person on staff that manages this stuff, and then that is working on your brand, that's working on, you know, the problems in talent acquisition and
Mm.
how you're attracting and converting people to the company. And after a few conversations, they're like, all right, yeah, why don't we create a position? We'll figure this out.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
walk into the office and say, hey, this needs to get done.
Yeah, pretty much. Essentially. My PR firm was not too happy with me because I, you know, jumped ship and went to a client, but you know, hey, it happens.
Awesome, awesome. So that's the start of your journey.
It is. Yeah. And I joined this company with kind of no idea what I was doing. And sort of made it up as I went along. But you know, you think of it much as you would any other kind of marketing or brand position. It's the same thing. It's just people.
Which company was, what year was this?
I want to say, oh God, I don't even know. I'd have to look at my LinkedIn, but this was, you know, 2010, maybe I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So like 11 years ago. Yeah, that definitely is before the term like talent attraction or talent branding was even, I don't even think it existed at that time, right?
Definitely not. Yeah, no one was talking about it. And you asked the company, it's called Life Technologies. It's a big biotech down in San Diego that's since been bought and sold a few times, but yeah.
Awesome. So well, that's what you did. So I'm curious, like, I just want to dig in here a little bit. Like, since that term didn't exist, like, what did you do? It's like, what was your job? Like,
yeah,
there's no rule book, right? There's no like how to. There's no this is the standard practice to make, I don't know, a good talent brand or whatever. So
yeah.
how did you go about that?
Yeah. So the job started essentially like a social media manager type position, where, you know, it's mainly focused on social and like peer-to-peer conversations, less PR, less kind of the more traditional marketing and advertising channels.
Sure.
But over time, you know, I kind of gathered more and more things within the company to focus on. So helping with, you know, how the company showed up to university recruiting events, starting to manage centralized budgets around, you know, things like Indeed and you know, LinkedIn and stuff like that. And more pieces, you know, that would be involved in the usual marketing stack kind of started falling under this umbrella term of talent attraction or employer brand.
Awesome. So, you know, obviously things have changed. The term is now fairly, well, I wouldn't say common, but it's definitely well known. Everyone knows what talent branding is for the most part. Of course, there are still some companies out there who haven't quite gotten it yet. But I think there's a lot of businesses are starting to realize the importance, right? Because they're realizing we need more candidates, or the candidate flow is not enough, or you know, there's so many companies out there. There's always like the pool of candidates always seems to be shrinking. And the competition seems to be growing. So I think people are starting to realize the importance, definitely, of what you do. So I'm curious, you know, in the number 11 years you've been doing this, you know, what are the trends or what are the big things that have changed? I'm sure a lot has changed. Basically, you know, it didn't exist then, now it does. And, you know, there's so many social platforms, so many things available. Like how do you see this changing, and where do you see it going?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest changes that's happened since, you know, this kind of started was that most companies or most practitioners in this field point their work outwards. So, you know, towards candidates or towards the outside market. The job though has really expanded inside a company. So like, you know, yeah, the funnel is always something that's on people's mind. How can I optimize it? How can I get more in the top? How can I get more people to accept offers? You know, all of those conversion points, brand is involved there. It's not always money. You know, people go to startups for lower salaries, and there's a reason. There's, you know, an attraction to that type of company or that type of experience. But when I say point the job inwards, If you take a job profile like a software engineer that might cost the company $40,000 to hire, you lose that person, and it's not only the business impact but financial.
Sure.
So retention has really become something that's a focus of this job too.
Really?
Not always in all positions, but you need to think of it that way, and I do think of it that way, that the talent brand moves into the company as employee experience.
Right.
So that's one theme that I would say has changed. The other big kind of trend in the space is technology. So gone are the days where it's just posts on social media.
Yeah.
There's ever increasing HR tech that allows automation in this field. So a lot of the cool stuff that's coming out now is automating candidate communications, chat bots, AI, all those fun buzzwords that you hear. And I would say that's major infancy. Only in the just last couple of years have these even been on the lips of the biggest companies looking to do really good talent brand work.
Right. Yeah, because I've nowadays with social media, it's a lot easier, isn't it, than before, to really like build your brand.
Yes and no.
No?
I do. So I personally, in my practice, I'm less of a fan of talent brand on social media.
Okay.
I'm more of a kind of analytical performance marketer. So the companies that I've worked at have been hyper growth startups that have just exploded. So it's to some extent at those companies less important about the brand side, more important about the numbers game of getting volume into the funnel and making optimizations to what you're doing to make it more efficient, or eventually targeting better people, or more fit people for the roles. But yeah, and then, the whole social media landscape today is a little bit of a nightmare in and of itself, but it's still an effective tool, still a channel. But I'm much more interested in kind of the programmatic side of things, the demand generation side of things, and brand nonetheless is still quite important. But it's generally not how I build my strategies, at least, or a complete strategy, at least.
Right. So when you say like demand, like what are some tips that you think that, any, say a small business who doesn't have a lot of budget, what are some things that they can do right away? Or maybe even on the agency side, they need to recruit for a specific pool of candidates. Is there some like things that anyone can really start getting into without like having a, $100,000 budget or $1 million budget?
Yeah, no, there definitely are. The world of aggregators, so the Indeeds of the world, they've existed for quite a long time. But what a lot of people don't realize is that your Indeed rep, I'm going to get in trouble by Indeed, isn't always on your side. They're there to spend money. So my advice to folks kind of starting out is like, if you have a small budget, really dig in on where you're going and pay attention to each job and how it's spending. So for example, let's say you've got a small amount of money and you want to advertise on a few performance-based vendors. And what I mean by that is like, gone are the days where you necessarily need to buy a 30-day job posting. You're paying money up front without knowing what's going to come back. Whereas a lot of these platforms, like the pay-per-click platforms, Indeed, search engine marketing, you only pay when you get a click.
Sure.
So that's kind of my advice, is pay attention to vendors like that, work with vendors like that, and really stay on top of like every dollar that's going out, because they can, performance vendors can run away with your money really fast. You get a bunch of applications that you don't actually need.
Sure. That's a big one, isn't it? Yeah, I remember we had to really deal with that when I was at WeWork and launching. So actually something I want to discuss with you, I want to get your insight, feedback on it. Something I've been working on, and it's actually been really well, and it's the concept of creating talent communities for your niche audience. So, like there's things like Facebook groups, right?
Sure.
So for example, if I'm an agent or I'm a company and I need to hire like a specialized skill set, say like a JavaScript engineer. Right? So what I've been, and this is something I've been researching in, and I'm actually starting to see that it actually works really well, is you gather this audience almost like a normal brand or an influencer does, right? You target, you gather, and you put them into these groups, and you give great content, you add value, you're serving them, and organically, I'm seeing that these groups start to grow, and specifically since it's only for like JavaScript engineers, this talent community starts to grow with the specific skill set. And because you're the one who's managing it and you're adding value, these people tend to listen, whatever you have to say. And then when it comes time to post a job there or say, hey, I'm having a new opportunity, anyone interested, or you send that information there, that the reaction is really, really good. So it's like almost having a candidate pipeline, but they're not really a pipeline because they're not interviewing with your company. It's just an audience that's there, but that you can tap into any time that you need to start hiring for that specific niche or skill set.
Yeah.
It's like, have you much experience in that area? Or
yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you actually described there is doing it exactly right. So what I'll describe what's wrong. What people do wrong with talent communities. Usually it's a group of past applications from your applicant tracking system that you either invite somewhere or you blast out a company newsletter that has nothing to do with them. So the words that and they don't care. The words that you said was adding value, getting like-minded folks together, and kind of nurture. So it's nurturing that audience. You're not asking for things necessarily, you're building actual community, and community means conversation. So yes, when done really well, talent communities are an incredible resource, but there are very, very few companies who do them well.
I noticed that.
And people underestimate the time that it takes, because what you said was providing content and value, and that means creating content and value, or getting people to do it for you, likely for free. So it's not an easy thing, but it is a wonderful thing for exactly the audience that you just described. Very, very hard to hire niche communities that want to talk to like-minded people in their field.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to talent branding, and this is something I'm noticing more and more of as I talk to different companies and even recruiters, is that they think this talent branding is just a way for them to spam their jobs on social media, right? But no one really gives a shit about your company if they don't really have that relationship, right? Or that you have to give before you can get, before you receive. So that's why I'm absolutely building these talent communities and teaching people how to do it. It's more like, you have to actually create content that's relevant to them. There's nothing to do with your company, at least at first, right? The majority is for me, if it's JavaScript engineers, that's a community I'm growing, I'll actually talk to the hiring managers or friends who are actual developers and engineers and get them to post interesting content or the latest trends or even funny information like memes, right? JavaScript memes, things like that. That starts to get engagement and comments and likes. And interestingly enough, the algorithm, the Facebook algorithm, when they see that interaction and starts to build up, they will actually start promoting your group to other people, and it just organically grows.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's definitely not a quick fix, right? It's not something you just easily spam jobs every once in a while. Then you're gonna have absolutely zero in that group.
That's very right. I don't know the exact number, but I can estimate a guess that companies like your Amazons and Googles of the world, for their developer communities, probably have 15 or 16 people working on their talent community.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is big teams.
It's like a full-time job.
Full-time job. Yep,
wow.
Full-time job, just working on that side of the brand and that equation. Now, the Amazons and Googles of the world take it one step further and, take their talent communities and go in person, and that's another really big thing about communities, or particularly hard to hire. And I'm speaking engineering at this point. People, is they're kind of craving experiences and access. So, it's getting together, CTOs from top companies to sit down and say, like, here's how you build an engineering team, and do like a free open panel that everyone can join and learn about. And then no point during that panel are you, as smaller startup that's hosting this or whatever, banging them over the head with a "we're hiring" message. It's just the connection of your brand with other experts making this event happen. That's what's going to help you. It's not the overt marketing.
It's kind of like the people get it backwards a lot of times, isn't it?
Oh yes, always backwards.
That's interesting. I didn't know, Google and those guys actually had full-time staff, a number of full-time staff just for that.
Oh yes, big teams for this stuff.
Yeah, I guess they have a lot of to hire. Awesome. Well, yeah, that's something interesting. So I'm glad I got your insight on that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and actually building off of that, so I'm imagining most of your audience listening to something like this will be a practitioner of one, interested in talent brand. So this is a prime example of one of the first things I tell leadership when I'm coming in either as a consultant or a full-time employee is we are not going to boil the ocean with this work. We are not going to try to do everything and anything, and I'm not going to jump up and do whatever you think you want to do. You focus in deeply on the talent demand that the business needs to succeed. And you look at the data in the ATS and talk to the recruiters and understand where the hot spots are. Right. And you design tailored, very specific strategies for a few of those groups. If you are a practitioner of one, that is all you're going to have time for, and all you're going to have budget for. So one of the hardest things in this job is going to a CTO and telling him, no, I'm not going to do that idea that you just want. I'm not going to put up that billboard, next to Google's campus. It's not the most impactful use of your money. It's not the best use of your time. So it's a lot of really critical data-driven conversations with execs around like what we're not going to do.
Right. Yeah, I guess a lot of people, when they first they want to just take over the world, right? Unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, people just try way too much, and a talent community is the perfect example, or the type of talent community you described.
That's true. That's really true.
If that is your focus, if that is truly like what needs to happen to make these hires, then great, invest in it well. But doing 5 things half-assed is not the approach in this job.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they looking to build that community at first, they try to get as many people in as possible. They literally try to just spam the whole world. And but it's as you mentioned, it's just simplify it, right? Just go for a small target niche, and then you grow from there. Start small, build up. Interesting. Okay, cool. So moving forward now, I just want to go to the next question. What areas do you think companies and brands should put more focus on now, to attract the right talent? In this day and age, 2021, what are some things that companies need to, in your point of view, put more focus and effort in?
Yeah, so it's a growing field that I'm going to talk about. So it's programmatic advertising. A lot of bigger companies have this right now, and it's usually like a SaaS platform or a SaaS vendor attached to an agency that you hook up to the ATS, and it allows you to very intelligently manage a bunch of different vendors at once. And the company that I partner with and use at every company that I work with is Recruitix. And again, we had them at WeWork, we had them at Uber. And that's I see as like the bedrock to a talent attraction strategy. It's how you get a handle of the funnel and can control the funnel with the ebbs and flows of the business. That's absolutely number one, a piece that you must put in place if you're of a certain size. Small companies may not make sense. Then the next piece is the employee value proposition work. So by that, it's what I mean by that is it's what you get for what you give at a company. It's the value of employment beyond just monetary.
Exactly.
And the reason why that needs to be done quickly and early in this process is most companies that haven't done this work, they say, we hire rock stars and ninjas and, like stuff like that. That's non-specific language. It doesn't differentiate you from your competitor. It isn't necessarily true. So, doing the hard work of like really digging in and getting that truthful, differentiated, specific language and focus areas of what you want to sell candidates, and then training your staff on how to talk about that in an intelligent way. Those are the two linchpins of a beginning strategy.
I guess that's what you mentioned earlier in our talk about like going and moving in, like inside, right? Not external, just internal.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I said, the pointing this work internally, EVP is actually the start of it. So that employee value proposition work. So when this is done really well, not only does the EVP show up on your career site and your marketing and your ads, all that kind of stuff, is also woven into the employee experience in the types of questions you answer or ask in the interview process. How you structure your all hands, all of that stuff should reinforce these kind of core tenets of what an employee experience is. And that is directly related to employer brand. And it matters so much, particularly at a fast growing company, because, it's just as important to dissuade candidates from joining you as it is to, convince them to, the wrong candidates for your point in time at a company.
That's true. Also, so I'm curious to know this, is, this EVP thing is really is picking up. A lot of companies, in Japan is a little bit behind, but even in Japan it's starting to gain steam. But I've noticed it's kind of I wouldn't say if the word is disturbing, but it's this trend where companies think it's just about putting nice words together.
Right.
And just like they hire like an agency to put together some nice concepts and then they throw it out. But again, what you're saying earlier is like digging deep the truth of what your employees think, what their experience really is, how they feel. It's not really just a nice writing or a mission statement you put on the wall, and it may not really reflect truly what your employees are really thinking of.
That's absolutely right. A lot of people, there's a debate, whether EVPs can be produced by an agency at all. I say yes. It's about the methodology that you use to get employees to write it for you. Right. So you get the right group of people in a room, guide them along a process to, illuminate the proof points, the selling points of a company, gelling around, the values and the mission of the company. So like, it can definitely be done by a consultant, but yes, it's not marketing. It's not just marketing language. Right. It needs to be truthful language, but truthful language that's also future leading and aspirational. So, and a good example of that is like working at a fast growing company or a hypergrowth startup or something like that. You may not have, let's say, 401k or something like that, or a fully fleshed out benefits program. That's okay, but being honest about what you do have and where you're going, kind of that aspirational message, that's just as important as pretty words. Right.
Yeah. I remember because at WeWork, when I joined WeWork, we didn't even have an office. I think for the first month I didn't even have insurance, which in Japan is mandatory to have.
Oh wow!
They were still working on the process and the paperwork, so it was that early when I joined. And forget about 401k. It's like, what the hell is that? Right. But I think we all really had a vision on what we wanted to do, so that was really good. But yeah, that's interesting though that you mentioned that it's really about pulling the truth, right? The root. Like whether you hire an agency or not, it's about getting the real value, what your employees actually feel. Because if they think it's shit, the experience is terrible, no matter how many pretty words you post up on your social media, the employees' Twitters or their own Facebook or Instagram posts are going to be contrary to that, which is their words speak louder than anything, right?
Right. No, that's exactly right. And that's why kind of internal marketing of this and internal reinforcement of it is so important, because the more that you remind people of the experience that that they say they're having, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for
But the
sure.
more likely they are to repeat the messages externally.
So like if you were to say advise, say if I have a small company, again, I don't have much of a budget, like would you have like a simple framework, like a 1, 2, 3, this is how you can get develop your EVP? Or
Oh geez.
like a super simple, like really like just kind of, high level but simple process. This is what
yeah, I absolutely. You willing to pay my hourly rate? I'm kidding. So yes, I would say it's let's see, a couple steps. So audits first. So take a look at everything that you have that has employee sentiments and employee statements. So that could be surveys, Glassdoor, employee exit interviews, all that kind of stuff. Get that data, analyze it, see what your current state is. Map that against competitors. So pick a handful of talent competitors and look at all their properties. If you can, talk to employees, get a sense of what they have and what they're saying and what employees are feeling. And then the next phases of that work are get a big group of people internally together that are stakeholders here. So this is employees of all levels in all departments, and start doing a workshop or some sort of session that you design that teases out the core components of their experience at work and why they joined and why they stay, that type of information. And with those 2 or 3 data sets, kind of triangulate it, and you can do some writing. You can kind of see a theme there and see where your company fits as a differentiated company from that talent competitor set you just had. Super simplified version of kind of what agencies or consultants would actually do, but that in essence is it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think even just that is great, because a lot of people don't really even know where to start.
Yeah,
again,
totally.
You'll just hire an external agency who sometimes, a lot of times, they don't even know what they're doing, right?
Correct. Yeah, totally. And a sign of a good agency is asking them what they're going to, or well, not even asking them, but seeing what they're going to audit. What are they going to look at before this process? If they don't ask for anything, or they ask for almost
really
nothing.
Interesting, because I've worked in some of my previous companies. It's like, they would hire agency, but they wouldn't even ask. It's more like they would just try to come up with pretty words.
Yeah.
That would match what the company's trying to do, but doesn't really matter with like the actual sourced internal data.
Totally.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I'm curious to know, what are some exciting things you're currently working on in this area? Like what are some personal things that you personally think, oh, this is really awesome, like regardless of your job or not, it's like this is something in talent attraction that's really interesting for you?
Yeah. I'm debating whether I give client names or not. I probably shouldn't.
It's
so
okay. Yeah, don't give client names. You can just give general industries.
Totally. So, the one project that pops in mind right now is it's nothing new. It's nothing innovative, but it's a good example of doing this work right. So I have a big US based client that has tens of thousands of warehouse workers. And warehouse workers right now in the US are very, very difficult to hire. Massive labor shortage, lots of turnover.
Wow.
And essentially what I'm doing with this company is doing a teardown of the experience that warehouse workers have prior, like before they even hear about the company, all the way to after they exit. And understanding at each stage, at each area of their experience, what's going on, what information do they need to know, what do they want, what aren't they getting enough of, what would convince them to like stay longer or submit that application. So I'm doing research at each of those stages with focus groups and all that kind of stuff, user research, competitor audits, all that. And then building a repeatable content strategy to help address issues at each of those stages, with the ultimate goal of reducing the cost of acquisition and increasing retention.
Right.
Nothing new, but it's the type of work that will have massive impacts, not only on a company's bottom line, but like just their sanity. You know, like people are going
Right.
crazy right now trying to hire this type of job profile, and any incremental improvement that the brand can make at each of those stages will be, you know, they'll love it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious though, because when it comes to that, that means there's gonna have to be some like internal cultural shift or change or transformation that needs to happen as well for the company, right? If there's issues that need to be resolved, does that mean you work really closely with like maybe the HR EVP or something like that?
Yeah, no, when done right, absolutely. You know, that is part of this role. I mean, this is one of those interesting positions that literally touches the C-suite all the way down to the warehouse worker. You know, and that, when done right, is what this work should do. But yeah, no, I mean, I will, you know, I'm a consultant on this company right now. But I guarantee you the recommendations will go to the VP of operations and the COO and stuff like that. And there will be recommendations in there on things that have nothing to do with brand, but will impact brand.
The employee experience.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool, because I noticed like this is something you're really like hammering down, is that it all starts internally, right? That's like the truth. That's where all the data you need. Where a lot of companies, I think, they don't focus on that. Yeah.
One of my favorite little quotes is, you know, when somebody goes to Glassdoor, I have a client that says like, I'm getting all these shitty reviews on Glassdoor. You know, what I say to them is like, you don't actually have a Glassdoor problem, you have a culture problem,
right?
Or you have an HR issue. Yeah. So, you know, like I like to dig to the root of saying, okay, what's actually behind this statement? Is this a trolling, venting employee, or is there structurally something wrong?
Right.
You know, you can slap a Band-Aid response to it, but like, it's not going to stop unless you dig in and fix what's actually wrong.
The actual root cause.
Yep.
That's interesting. Again, that's so interesting, because again, I don't know if it's over in the US or if it's just Japan, but there's a really most people think of talent branding as really just an external thing. They don't really deal much with I mean, sure, HR will be involved, but not to the extent where, you know, they will think that perhaps potentially an internal transformation might be necessary. It's more about just getting their HR stamp of approval and done. Whereas what you're talking about is really a proper way the real way to do it is really, it's going to be changing everything, right? Internally and externally. It has to be both.
Yeah. Well, and you know, I'll take this to a very dark place for a minute. You know, that doesn't necessarily always happen, that change. So a great example might be very, very high volume, you know, low cost employees. There are companies in the world where the strategy isn't to fix the retention, it's to fix the top of the funnel. And I can't pass judgment there, because that is how companies run sometimes. You know, like the high attrition numbers and high acquisition costs might be okay in high turn positions. So like, I'm not necessarily saying you must do this, but it is a lever that you can pull.
Right. I guess it depends ultimately what you're trying to achieve, right? As an organization.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool.
And actually, one more thing there. So like you mentioned Japan. That's another really interesting, complex layer to all of this work, is localization. And by that I mean not only the language and the way you speak, but also you know, just kind of how a specific country's or even location's culture is. You know, all too often, you know, I sit in my HQ somewhere and you ship out a package strategy to a market that doesn't land right because it's not specific enough to how people act in that space. So, you know, brand in Asia is totally different. And a totally much more difficult nut to crack. And I would say Japan is the hardest nut to crack of them all.
Yeah, you have the experience, huh?
Yeah. I mean, who knows how actually successful, you know, the work is there, but it's definitely, you know, you check your hubris at the door when trying to manage an employer brand strategy in a different market, and really rely on your local.
It's so true, because every country has a different culture, right? Like the people, the people who live in those countries, whether it's Japanese or from Vietnam or China or the US or South America. It's like everyone has their own culture that they grew up with. So that means that the company culture will also be different. The way they operate is different. Sometimes it's like you can be, it's a global, like Autodesk, for example. The US office and then the Japan office is completely different. It's like two separate companies.
Absolutely. And even just how people treat and think about changing jobs is completely different. So, loyalty and job loyalty, that requires, if you're trying to snag somebody from, I don't know, some company that they've been with for 10 years because it's culturally ingrained in that place, that you stay and that you dedicate yourself to this work, and that leaving is betrayal.
Right.
That requires a completely different attraction strategy than in another market where people job hop.
Yeah.
So that it's something you definitely need to consider about this work. And I've failed many times using what I thought would work in international locations, and have learned that lesson the hard way.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you learn from your mistakes, but it's interesting. It really is fascinating, I think. So
Absolutely.
How would you define a successful talent branding or talent attraction strategy for a company?
Yeah. So I look at a few key metrics generally in this work. So I'll talk about the advertising side first. So the metric that I always use as the golden metric in advertising is the percent of candidates who make it to an on-site interview compared to the percent of candidates who make it to an on-site interview from the career site. So the reason that metric matters most, and the reason why I didn't say the percent of candidates hired, is when you think about the traffic coming through your career site, by and large, that's organic, it's free. It's people who already know you, they found you some way, they're interested and they're applying. The percent of traffic coming through paid channels that make it to an on-site interview, that's stuff you're paying for. So if you take those two numbers and look at them next to each other, and you keep making optimizations to the paid side of your media, and get it as close to the career site metric, you are doing a really good job about getting efficient with your advertising spend. So whenever possible, that is the one metric that I drive all media through or towards. And it simplifies the whole equation. It makes it easier to tell a story. And oh yes, I mentioned why I didn't pick hires as the metric there. Yes, that's important, obviously. But when you think about a talent attraction role, it's generally attraction.
Right.
So it's getting people into the process and handing them off to recruiting to deal with.
Sure.
So it's up to recruiting to screw it up after my job is done, if you think of it that way.
Right.
And I do look further down the funnel. I do look past hire to see what's going on, what channels are producing quality hires and stuff like that. But from an advertising perspective, once they hit on-site interview, that generally means quality. It's been through enough screening that we can trust to say this is a quality channel. And that hiring decision moment, any number of reasons could have happened as to why they didn't take it. And that has no reflection on the media. It could be commute, but that on-site interview signals you're doing a good job, you're driving good quality.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So then on the flip side, so the employer brand kind of metrics, rather than the advertising stuff, that's much more difficult to put a finger on in terms of like one metric that matters. If I were to boil it down and distill it to one metric, it is the would you recommend question. Would you recommend company X to a friend? And that's an employee survey. So make sure all of your employee surveys that you have that question.
Right.
And that signals, if you get really good data, you can slice, how many people from LinkedIn recommend my company after 2 years.
Right.
That's signaling, the people who come in from LinkedIn are staying and they are proponents of your company. very, very hard data to get. I could go on forever about other types of metrics associated with kind of brand or
Sure.
kind of content-based campaigns, but that's a core one.
That's really, really helpful. Yeah, it's very insightful. Thank you. I learned something myself.
Good.
Great. So my final question again is just going to be, I guess, a little bit more perhaps personal, but perhaps someone is new to the industry and they're thinking about, hey, I want to get into a career of this talent attraction or talent branding. So I just want to hear from your personal point of view, from your experience being in the industry for over a decade now. What would you say are some of the key benefits, the things that really excited you, that why you're interested in what you do, and perhaps also some of the things to be aware of, like the cons of this job?
Yeah, great question. So, when I interview for companies or when I'm selling myself as a consultant, why I say I've stuck to employer brand versus like heading over into the marketing division and climbing the ranks there, is anyone can sell a widget, a thing.
Right.
That gets boring to me, at least. Hawking stuff.
Right.
When you sell a job, or joining a company, that's highly personal. It's one of the most vulnerable, difficult, stressful moments in anyone's life. It's changing a job, it's buying a house, it's getting married, that kind of stuff. So for me, doing marketing and advertising and branding strategies for a life event is fascinating and complex and weird and always changing.
Right.
So that's what I love about this job, is the human side of it, and it's the people side of it. Things that I don't love about this job, or things to watch out for. It's a new field still. So you are in a position in an organization, generally sitting either under talent acquisition or marketing or HR, with a whole bunch of people around you that don't know what this work is, or how to do it, or how it's done right,
or unrealistic expectations on what
unrealistic expectations. Absolutely. Or the biggest one, zero budget. So, and that's not the case at big companies. That's not the case at companies who get it. But the thing to watch out for is an organization that sees its value but will open the checkbook for it. Your job is going to be borrowing and stealing money from departments to do this work.
Right.
HR will very rarely fund this program completely. You're gonna really need to dig for money. Right. And this work costs money. So if you like that type of thing, if you like making the arguments, if you like pitching, if you like constantly fighting for stuff, and attention and, access to marketing tools and all that stuff, then you'll love it. If you don't, it's not the job for you.
Right. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that insight and information. So the final thing I just want to see is, like, I know you have your own business right now. I don't know if you have any other channels that you have, like YouTube or I don't know, podcast, but is there anything where people or where the audience can find you and your services?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I don't have a website, believe it or not. I don't. I fly under the radar. I have more business than I can handle some days. Awesome. So but yeah, so find me on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll add my LinkedIn profile in there somewhere.
Sure,
Feel free to message.
I will put it in the comments section.
Yeah, totally. I've toyed recently with expanding the business, hiring and that kind of thing. But for now, I've been really enjoying the sole practitioner approach.
Nice. You're gonna write a book?
Yeah, that's funny. I really should in my spare time, right? Maybe one day. Yeah.
I think it'd go well, because it's like an industry where people have a lot of there's a lot of misinformation on like how to do it. So people have no idea what it is even, right, in the first place.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there are definitely some books out there, but I'll admit I'm actually not really much of a business book reader. But yeah.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I think my time's running up, so I really appreciate you taking the time on your Friday. And hopefully, you can come back to Japan and then we can hang out again for drinks.
Oh my God, I can't wait. I want to go so bad. My partner has never been, and it's definitely on our list.
Bring the group. That'd be awesome.
Totally.
Japan is awesome.
It is.
No, it also has its headaches, like everything, but yeah.
Right. There
All
you
right.
go.
Well, have a great Friday, good weekend. Yeah, thanks again. Thanks so much.
You're so welcome. Good to chat with you.
Likewise.
Bye.
Bye.